Good afternoon, dear viewers. Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI. I'm your host, Karthiga. Many grade 12s are struggling with a difficult decision right now. High school is drawing to a close, and some are unsure which post-secondary option to choose. To discuss this dilemma, we'll have two high school teachers, Brodie and Karthiga Dharmananda, and two grade 12 students, Harish Sinnadurai and Vinod Sudhakaran. Parents and high school students, please stay tuned for this first discussion. In our second segment, we'll be having a one-on-one with Neethan Shan, who recently made history by becoming the first non-white president of the Ontario New Democratic Party. Our third segment will see us discuss what has happened in our community since the brutal end of the military conflict in Sri Lanka, with Kumar Ratnam from the CTC and Neethan from the NCCT. Always, please join our discussion at 416-623-8100, 416-623-8100. Welcome, Abhi, Karthiga, Vinod, and Harish. Thank you for coming on the show. So, as I said, many grade 12s, I believe this week, are going to be mailing in their selections for which post-secondary option they'll be making. So I thought we'll start the discussion with the two professionals in the room who deal with many high school students as part of your day. What are some of the challenges you're facing, or some of the dilemmas grade 12s are facing this year?
One thing I see is just making sure that you get your prerequisites that you need to even apply for these university programs. So for example, since I do teach business, I'll speak specifically about that. Applying for a competitive business program, you do need your math, so calculus and functions, for example. Right. And I see some students unaware of that and then unable to apply for these competitive programs. So just really looking into, before even the school year starts, what programs you might potentially be interested in, and then making sure you are taking those courses throughout the year.
Okay, so planning should really start in grade 11?
Yes, definitely. And even along with the planning process, just even strategically planning what kind of extracurricular activities you will be involved in as well. Okay,
all right. Abhi, what have you noticed?
Definitely in terms of understanding their path after high school, sort of having that vision of what they want. It's important for students to sort of self-reflect and find out what their passion is. And, you know, influences of parents and community members is important, but in the end, it's important for the student to choose a path that they will feel satisfied in, because otherwise, you know, they'll end up unsatisfied or having a four-year degree and not liking the field that they're in.
Many in our community, especially parents, and maybe your parents are a symptom of this, but they feel that for our children in our community, they should or have to go into a university. What do you think?
Yeah, and definitely, you know, it's definitely, there are many options available. University is not the only one. For example, in my grade 12 class, I had a student who, you know, tried hard, but academically was not ready, and was not, you know, with speaking with his other teachers, was not really ready for a university level. Well, and he was actually a Tamil student, and I advised him that, you know, to start off with a college program, but there are many bridging programs into university. So just because you start at college doesn't mean that you cannot end up in university. And so in the end, taking the advice of all the teachers, he's decided to go into Seneca at York, and moving into a bridging program after 2 years into a university, a York University degree. So
why does this fear exist? The parents want to send their children into a university.
I think the fear comes about in terms of what's available after university, in terms of employment opportunities, and just talking to parents through Parents' Night and whatever other venues, I just find that they're unclear, for example, if their student goes into a degree with psychology, where can that particularly lead them? Or certain arts degrees and so forth. They don't understand what job opportunities exist. And I think that's where the fear comes, and it's also up to the student to make sure that they kind of let their parents know their plan throughout, so their parents can feel more comfortable as well.
Were there any other challenges you noticed as a teacher?
Just, you know, paying attention to deadlines, because in high schools we give extensions, but especially with the application process, you know, in January when that application is due, it's due, right? And so many students may be a bit late or may not have all their supplementary applications in. So just making sure that you're on top of that, because applying for university is almost like another course or another assignment on top of the 4 or that you have that semester or the 8 that you'll have that year. So it's definitely a lot to keep on top of, but it prepares you for university, right? When you're
so
done.
Vinod and Sudhakar, Vinod and Harish, the deadlines were in January. So in the run up from September to January of your beginning of your grade 12 year, what were the thoughts running through your head?
I know a lot of students in my school, the problem was when they reached grade 12, they had these supplementary forms that they had to complete for university, and they had trouble filling those because they weren't prepared from the start. So I think part of the university application process is being one step ahead of everyone. Right. In order to be one step ahead, you need to have those extracurricular activities. And so a lot of students, I see them rushing into the different programs that my school had, and what happened was they didn't get a good position within those subcommittees. So I think planning from grade 9 and trying to figure out what you like extracurricularly and also planning to be the head of those sort of committees can also prepare you for grade 12 when you have to write those supplementary applications. And it can also get you one step ahead when you have to write those supplementary applications as well.
So it's safe to assume you started thinking about this before grade 12?
Yeah.
And at what grade and what activities did you get involved in order to have a strong application?
Well, at my school, what I did was I was within the student council from the start, so I would start helping with student council initiatives from grade 9.
From grade 9.
And once I reached grade 11 and 12, I was part of the student council, and also I really like to travel, so one of my things was going abroad, and I would go, like for example, a couple summers ago, I went to South Africa for a community service initiative, so I got a real breadth of experience, and also I was really involved in soccer. So I took things that I like, and I try to make myself more well-rounded amongst all those things, so I could just be like one step ahead of everyone
And you're going to
else.
be starting business at University of Western Ontario, and when did you make that decision? How did you know you were going into that?
Well, the problem with me was I was kind of undecided on what I wanted to do, because I was sort of like, I was really into science and biology and that sort of things, but I also wanted to do business as well. So at Western, the program, the way it works was I have the opportunity to do 2 years of science as well as 2 years of business, and in my 5th year combine both to get both degrees, so it worked out well for me.
Okay. Vinod, what was your thinking in that September to January, or was it similar to Harish that you were thinking about engineering before?
It was pretty similar. The way I started off is that I looked at what were my strengths and also what I was passionate about. So it ended up being that I liked math. I felt I was pretty good in it, and I also was interested in physics, so that led to engineering. And it's also, like he mentioned about the extracurricular stuff, it's really important in your supplementary because universities actually look at that and they actually consider it along with their marks. So you can have a high mark and also but not be involved, and that will not actually help you out in the end. So fortunately, I was also like starting in grade 11. That's when I realized that I should start getting more involved. So I was already involved in a couple of clubs that help out, like say, the community. And instead, for grade 11 and 12, I started running for more executive positions. So I started taking more leadership role. And
which clubs?
There's Me to We, it's part of Free the Children. And also in grade 11, I started writing poetry and started performing it as spoken word. So this helped me a lot because it helped me build a more confident person. And I also took leadership roles, such as being a co-chair for this event called the Race for Dignity, which is helping raise money to cure AIDS in Africa. And just leading this event for the first time at my school, it provided me a lot of leadership qualities. And I could mention this in my supplementary, which actually helped. And this also helped me achieve time management skills, which balancing with my work. And also, when it comes to supplementaries, every university has a different deadline, and we had to make sure, we had to keep all of them in mind and make sure we finished everything on time, along with our school.
So a takeaway for many of our parents and students is getting involved in public service activities, not only benefit your application, but more importantly, you build important skills, like Vinod mentioned. So early on, that preparing for post-secondary actually really starts in grade 9 would be a safe comment. Vinod, you chose to do engineering at University of Toronto, and you could have done it elsewhere at Western or at Waterloo and other McMaster. What was there any reason to choose a university where I'd assume you're going to be traveling from home? Yeah. Was there any thoughts about that when you were choosing?
I was considering also Waterloo, and it was first my choice was to see if I want to live away from home or stay at home. And also consider the cost that's involved, because actually living on residence is pretty expensive. And I also, but then considering that, I also considered the programs itself and see which program would I prefer more. And it's at U of T and Waterloo, they have different types of engineering programs. For Waterloo, it's you do co-op every other term, while for U of T, you can do co-op all together in 1 year, in one straight year. Right. So I found that more appealing, and and also like the university itself, and it ended up being that I could also travel from home, so that saves costs for me. So that's how I came up with that.
Another concern, Abhi and Karthiga, which I've heard from parents, is some parents have concerns sending their children to schools in universities that are outside of Toronto, which they would have to live at. What are the concerns that you've heard as well?
Yeah, definitely parents are concerned about students, and I guess the fact that parents don't have as much control, right? Because they won't be seeing their...
or maybe influence.
Yes, and the influence is available. But I think it's really important for students to be able to get that breathing room, to get that sense of responsibility for themselves and to fend for themselves. And I find that students come out stronger people at the end of it. And I think number one, when they're looking at where to go, it shouldn't just be about going away or staying here, but looking at the program. I think that's number one. Definitely.
I think I would underline that key point. It's about the program. In terms of the moving away, I think it really has to have that conversation between the parent and the student, because depending on the student's characteristic, are they able to do they take leadership in their own house? Are they doing their laundry at home right now? Because when you move out, it's not just the freedom, it's also the responsibility. There's an immense amount of that you have to manage your food, your everything, right? Because you're on your own. So some students that I know from personal experience sort of crumble because they can't juggle it all. They're maintaining a more strenuous academic program as well as all the day-to-day lifestyle that's required to live on your own. So I think it is a very important decision, definitely with the program, and depending on the individual student's behavior or personality, if they can handle moving out on their own. So
as a takeaway for parents, they have to really know their child and trust their child if they're capable of living on their own.
Right. And if they are, it's definitely a great experience. And it's not to say that if first year you live at home, second year you can't. You can move out, right? But it's definitely that first year is a very transitional year. So it's it's definitely an important decision, but it has to be made between the parent and the student who's moving to university.
And boys, what extent have your friends' decisions and choices affected your own?
Well, for me, a lot of my friends decided to stay within Toronto, and for me, I didn't necessarily see that as like a sort of thing that I should stay in Toronto as well. So I have a couple of friends coming to my university as well, but I looked at the program first to see if that's beneficial towards me. And also I see a pattern with a lot of Tamil kids is that they want to stay within Toronto or go to schools such as McMaster or Waterloo, where there's a lot of other Tamil kids as well. But at my school, I know that it's not so Tamil, and a lot of kids were applying outside to like Dalhousie and University of Ottawa. And what I saw with that was that there's a lot of lower cutoffs with those sort of schools and more incentives such as scholarships. So I think that people should sort of broaden their choices and look at those sort of schools too, because you can really get in and there's a lot of benefits that you can get from that as well.
Yeah, and actually from my own experience, I've noticed sometimes, when you graduate, it's not so much the school you went to, but the marks you obtained. And on that theme of, Abhi, Karthiga, and myself, we can reflect back on, we all went to university here. Karthiga and Abhi, what advice would you have to these two boys who are entering university in a few months?
I think first year, there is so much that will be different from high school. It's all about fending for yourself. You don't have teachers coming around asking you for your late assignments, which I know I've done quite a bit, right? And it's all about you at the end of the day. I mean, you have the opportunity to go to class or not go to class. You could skip so easily. Nobody's taking attendance. No one's coming after you. So it's really just self-discipline, I guess, and really mentally putting yourself in that space to really go after what you want and not forgetting that.
And I think another key point is to use your network and to build it from Frosh Week, and the friends that you build, that are academic and that are focused on their studies, so that you can still have a good time, but also when you have to study, you have a good peer group who can help answer questions and discuss issues in class. And so it's very, very important, and that it builds a skill that's lifelong, right? That to rely on a network of people, and if you try to do it by yourself, you'll soon realize that it's very difficult. So relying on your peers is very beneficial.
I have a similar advice, is not just building a network, but several networks. You'll come into contact with different circles, and continuing that theme of public service, getting involved in activities, because one thing I've noticed, I'm sure you two have noticed, is post-secondary, so after university, what the opportunities that it affords you, having these solid circles of networks, is immense. What advice would you give parents who have children in younger grades right now that are considering considering different options instead of university?
Yeah, I would definitely say that, to consider all options, and that all options are valid, because there's definitely a stigma in our Tamil community that the university is the best, and I think I've said that before, but just to, consider everything, because many people go to a 4-year university degree and then come back and do a post-grad at a college. So there's values to both systems, and just to be open to both, and not to say that taking one is limiting an option. So just because you start in college doesn't mean you'll end up not having a university degree at all. So being open to all the options available.
Yeah, and I would say I see a lot just the pressure that parents put in terms of really following certain streams or going into certain universities that have a certain, I guess, brand name attached to it, like U of T, and really just letting your child choose for themselves where they want to go, because I find those students who get that choice are happiest in the end.
And they'll actually perform better.
Exactly.
In the subject.
For example, I know I have a cousin who went into journalism, and I know the parents were kind of iffy about that, and now he's doing quite well in university with that degree.
Oh, that's good to hear. Boys, what are some of the questions you might have, perhaps, to some of us who've graduated and have done degrees?
Well, I know at first, for entering first year, it'd be pretty overwhelming, having all this new environment, having all this coursework upon us, but I was just wondering if it's easy to get out and join extracurricular stuff in first year, or should we get used to the university life before trying to branch out during second year, for example?
Personally, I feel that first year is when you should really get involved, because everybody is new to the university and everybody's looking to make friends, so that's the easiest time to kind of build your networks, because that's where everyone's searching for that. So really start in first year, personally.
With that network and making friendships come pressures and influences. How do you handle that? It's, again, they're outside of high school, they have more freedom. How do you think they can handle those peer pressures and sometimes negative influences?
I think it's just to remember the purpose of why you're there. Whether you're having to pay for it, or you're taking loans, or your parents are fortunate enough to provide you with that tuition, just remembering your purpose. You're there to study.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Unfortunately, time's up for this segment, but appreciate taking the time to come out today. Dear viewers, it's time for a short break. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back to CrossRoads. Here with us today is Neethan Shan. As many of you know, Neethan's very active in our Tamil community, but also plays a serious role in Canadian politics. Neethan, who's familiar for many of us, has served as a public school trustee in Markham, has recently got elected as the president of the Ontario New Democratic Party, making him the first non-white to become so. Welcome, Neethan.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Stranger to us here at TVI. So, Neethan, the position you've been elected about a month ago is the president of the Ontario New Democratic Party, right?
Yeah.
So, for many of those watching who are unsure about the difference between the president of the party and the leader of the party, can you just make that clear?
Well, definitely there's two sides to any party. One is the actual politics of elected politics, and so we have 17 members of provincial parliament and a leader elected. So they deal with the caucus, they deal with legislation.
And the leader is?
The leader is Andrea Howard, who does that particular aspect of the running of the party. Technically, to be the public's face, make the legislation, and make sure that we are staying in keeping in this case we are not government.
Yeah.
We are in opposition, so keeping the government accountable.
Right.
On the other side is the party's infrastructure, which has the executives, which has riding associations, and so on. And our role as the president is to make sure our party has the right amount of money. The party is actually organizing on the grassroots and it's ready for elections, making sure the party has its members have the voice in the party through conventions and so on, to run the organization. So, so as the president, the financial responsibility as well as the accountability to members and engaging members through riding association. We have 107 of them because that's the number of ridings in Ontario, and that would be the responsibility of the president along with all the execs who are elected.
Okay.
So it's a partnership role between the leader and the president of the party. We work together to make sure that we are
to make sure all these 107 ridings are supported,
represented, and prepared for the next round of elections.
And before we go into detail, I'm curious. After being involved in politics for so long, how does it feel to reach this big position in a way?
It's a phenomenal success, not just for me, but I see that as a reflection of a success of the community, because every level, and there's been a couple of downs as well. It's not always been an ups, and I've had some elections where I narrowly lost with big margins too. So throughout this process, it's a learning process, and this it's almost at the end it pays off. Hard work pays off, and it's not just recognition of my skills and my talents, but also the community's ability to organize and be able to support political leaders. And right from my first experience of being a Tamil Students Association president in my high school, that's how we get transferable skills to transfer to a president of an Ontario NDP, a prominent political party in Canada. So the community has played a role, and it's a success that I could share with a lot of people.
Yeah, and connecting with our previous segment, that any leadership role, whether it's in business or in politics, really starts with the development of those skills in high school and in university.
Yeah, regardless of whichever career you go into, the extra skills that you learn is what you're going to take to any positions.
So after the last provincial election was 2011, and the NDP made considerable gains, and now, as you said, have 17 seats in the provincial parliament. With this increase, what is the new vision of the NDP? And the reason I asked new vision is that when they selected you, you were running against a former union organizer who was well known, and you went against. It was a strong election. It was a very close, competitive election. So as a result, you can say there's a new vision. So what?
Well, I think there is an old vision which stays consistent with NDP's principle in terms of equity, social justice, workers' rights, and the role of unions and unionization in our society. That will still stay the same. What I bring in addition to that gets I would say added components of our vision would be engaging young people through the federal election, and then in the provincial election we saw a large number of young people resonating to NDP, NDP's goals and leadership and so on. So engaging young people and giving a platform, engaging racialized communities and minority communities in Canada, and giving them a voice within the party and engaging them in meaningful decision making. And me being at the level of a leadership in terms of president kind of reflects that this is not just tokenistic involvement at certain levels where we celebrate like multicultural festival, but in fact it's a meaningful position to have. So those are the new type of visions. And then I also brought a 107 riding strategy, and I said, during the election, we might have priority ridings, but in between election, all 107 ridings have to be our priority. So we cannot say we cannot win here or we cannot win there. We will be building that on every single level. So those are kind of the newer community organizing, grassroots mobilizing, racialized communities, young people who are on the margins being brought into further decision making. And that vision is completely shared 100% by our leader as well, Andrea Howard. So we can definitely work together in taking that vision forward.
So what is the goal? In presumably we'll have a provincial election, who knows, within a year or 2 years, right?
Form government with elected representatives who are reflective of the communities.
Okay.
Form government with a massive mandate from the community to take on the social justice causes that we've been fighting for.
Right.
Because as opposition, you can definitely voice your concern, but unless you're government, we will not be able to effect the change that we need to in terms of legislation. So with the minority government, we have shown that we can make a significant amount of changes. Let us form the government and show the community what the vision we bring.
Okay. About a month, 2 months ago, we had a debate with a Liberal, Brad Duguid, and a Conservative, Christine Elliott. Unfortunately, your party couldn't make it. But one thing that came up was the NDP support for the Liberal budget. Can you tell us why your party supported it and what demands it had?
Well, we wanted to. We didn't want to bring down the government.
Right.
People had decided only a few months ago that this is how they want the Ontario governing structure to look, and we respect that decision from the people. And they also overwhelmingly want all parties to work together to make things happen. So we had put forward many demands, including like a 2% tax on the richest of the people in there.
Those making over
500,000, and we also asked for increase. We didn't want to freeze the OW and the disability benefits and so on. And we had asked for a lot more things. We'd asked about the job cuts, to reverse the job cuts that are going to happen in the Northern Ontario through the transportation related changes. We asked for the tourism industry changes to be reversed. We asked a lot of things, but we know that in negotiation we may not be able to get all of those things. But we were able to get certain amount of make the budget much more fairer, because the budget itself is not an NDP budget; it's a Liberal budget.
Right.
So we don't support the entire budget. We want to make things happen for the community.
But you're allowing it to pass.
By not voting against it. But at the same time, this is not done. Yes, the budget talk is still going on, and there are things that we would like to have implemented ahead of time, so that we don't want to get into a situation where we have to force an election, but the arrogance of the ruling party will force an election, right? Because minority government means you work with other parties to make things happen.
Okay. And recently in the news this week, Dalton McGuinty came through with legislation, it's in the House right now, in the works, for Catholic schools to allow gay straight alliances, and the NDP has supported that. And what is the importance of that as a
NDP
society?
was instrumental in keeping that. It's not NDP supported. NDP as an official opposition, opposition as an opposition party. Our education critic and Peter Tabbins was very much involved in making sure that particular aspect.
So why is it important as a society?
As a society, it is important. It's about human rights. People could have various choices that they have made in terms of religion, in terms of sexual orientations, and so on, or it's their personal choice. And to discriminate somebody because of their religion, because of their socioeconomics, because of their sexual orientation is not Canadian value.
Right.
We have a Charter of Rights, and if students want to organize around that as a voice, because high school students are agents of change. They have all sorts of different clubs. You heard from people before that they want to go to Africa to stop AIDS. And they want to do all those things. Why not take care of equity issues in our own soil?
And as Tamils, we have to be very conscious of that need to protect minority rights.
Whether we agree on particular choice of somebody else, that should not stop us from supporting a human rights on human rights basis, that every individual should have equal opportunity and equal outcome at the end of the day, right? So
from that debate or discussion came out, many are asking this question: as a society, as Ontario, should we continue to fund Catholic education? What is the NDP and
I think there is this is the discussion that NDP continues to have, and at this point the position is that the current structure works, and it's not something that we have revisited, and are structurally as a party have decided to go on with what we have currently existing. But this debate is continuing to happen. And there are certain things that is happening in all the other parties, not just in
I think the Liberals are considered the same position, not to look into defunding it.
Defunding it.
Yeah, the Green Party, the president has opened it up, and he said we should have a discussion. Should we continue it, and should we merge it? And that's what he was suggesting.
I think discussions are always a positive thing, because people's mind about certain things might change.
Right.
But unless there's a warranted reason for us to, if, for example, the GSAs are an example of if the Catholic school boards have overwhelmingly opposed, the particular equity issue, then this will bring up a conversation again about where we go with respect to school boards, right? But at the same time, we do have a lot of priorities within the school system. Right. Our ESL funding, our special needs funding, our per capita funding. There are so many issues within the education system. I think we need to focus on that. We let faith-based school take over one election.
Right.
When a lot of the underlying issues about education were not addressed. So I think that's what NDP would focus on.
Okay. And coming to our community in terms of building leadership and our involvement in various parties, and what skills, what would you tell our young people to get involved in, and what skills to develop?
I think people need to develop interpersonal skills, how to relate to somebody else who's different from you, how to have the conversation in a proactive manner than to be reserved or be, one of the most important thing to note is that our students may perform well academically, but their self-confidence and how they portray themselves is still an issue for our community that needs to be addressed. So that's one thing. The second thing is have some conviction of what you believe in, because you cannot be liked by everybody. And that's one thing in politics. If you want everybody to like you, you are not going to end up doing anything right.
You won't stand up
you
for
won't
anything.
Stand up for
you
anything,
stand up
right?
for everything, you won't stand up for anything.
So there are places when people may not like you for a stand you take, but that's okay. What you need to figure out is what is your vision of the world and how do you want to change that. And I think a lot of the time our community has worked on a grassroots level, knocking doors, putting literature and so on. It's time they get into leadership role as well in writing associations, regardless of the party. I would like them to be coming to NDP, but regardless of where they stand, they need to take on leadership role, decision-making roles, and that will only bring justice not just to our community, but all the other marginalized communities.
Okay. That's all the time we have for you, but congratulations again, Neethan.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming. Dear viewers, we'll have a short break, and we'll have our third segment when we come back. The end of the war back home saw tens of thousands of innocent Tamil civilians die needlessly and savagely. What has happened since then? What is to happen? To analyze these questions and more, we have Neethan Shan and Kumar Ratnam. And Mr. Veer Vijendra, who is supposed to join us, is not able to make it. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for taking time to come out today. So 3 years ago, a little more than 3 years ago, our community was in dire emotional straits. We were losing loved ones. Many of us couldn't bear the pain and the agony of what was happening back home. And thousands and thousands of us took to the streets. Neethan, can you recap the emotions at that time period? 3 years
Definitely, I think there was a sense of helplessness. We were organizing, having lots of people do fast, lots of people do walks, human chains, protests, all sorts of things, and we weren't able to stop it. So the emotions were A, helplessness, A, we couldn't make any changes to what was happening, B, we couldn't also relate or connect to anybody on the ground because we weren't able to have the conversations or the communications through the channels. So a sense of hopelessness, sense of despair, and that, in addition to that, I would say personally, for many of us, we felt treated second-class citizens in the countries that we lived in. For example, in Canada, in UK, in many places, if you were citizens of those countries, if you have that many citizens asking for something, why weren't the governments responding? Are we less than the others? And that particular sense of being betrayed. It was there for me and many of us. I wouldn't say for all of us, but that was the sense. And I think. And that hopelessness still continues in many ways.
Kumar, since that time period, how has the plight and our situation in Sri Lanka, what have we seen happen in the 3 years in the international scene and in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, first of all, it was a horrific end to a war. A war should always end in peace, but it didn't happen like that. And since then, although calmness is prevailing in Sri Lanka, but calmness is very perspective. Does that mean calmness mean peace? I wouldn't think so. People are still going through the same struggles they have in the past. And also for a certain group of people, the situation has also worsened. They've lost their land, their livelihood, and they could not go back to their homes. And their homes have been forcefully taken by other communities or by the government enforced settlements. So it's been a struggle to the people in Sri Lanka, mainly the Tamils.
Yeah.
And obviously the Sinhalese majority also have gone through the similar issues during the war, but obviously it's in a different form. But for the Tamils, I would say it's a long way to go back to their livelihood. It can only happen if the government is willing to work with us and provide the rights that is deserved for the citizens of Sri Lanka and mainly for the Tamils. Yeah, I would say the situation is not normal. It's still it's in a struggling environment. There's a lot of work to do.
One difference now that didn't exist during the war, the armed conflict, was the role the international communities played in these last 3 years. Right. What has happened?
The international community has changed. Like reflect to Neethan's statement earlier. During 2009, when we were going through the protest march and the fastings and all that, we were sort of felt neglected. But it has changed since then because there are evidences and witnesses coming out of what really happened during those last month of the war and how many people died and what did the Sri Lankan government did to our community in Sri Lanka. So the perspectives have changed. The international community is witnessing these changes and so that they are speaking on behalf of us, on behalf of human rights, I should say. Yeah. And the UN resolution that was made a few months ago also reflect that change too. Right. So there is improvements happening on the international community, but there is lots more to do.
Okay. As a result, following the end of the armed conflict, we have different voices representing our community on the global stage and as well as the Canadian stage. How has that been? What are the advantages and if any disadvantages? What?
Well, I think there's definitely a lot of advantages for having diverse voices. We had diverse voices in 70s and so on, but people chose their own leadership over time. And we had a strong leadership that was providing directions, guidance, and engagement of the public for a while. In the absence of that, when a vacuum comes up, you automatically see a lot more of the same thing that happens in terms of people grouping themselves around certain perspectives and views and so on, but ultimately with the same end goal of having political and human rights for our Tamil population in the Northern East. So it's a good thing to have diversified voice. It'll have more engagement because with many groups, there will be many people who are directly decision makers. Okay. I think one of the successes of the international community that is paying attention to us is the work of Global Tamil Forum, work of TGTE, including the work of TNA, as well as the diaspora organizations, youth organizations, and so on. So it's important for us to recognize the role that they play. The only disadvantage is when organizations get put forward as the priority than the people itself. And sometimes there needs to be a leadership training for many of the people who are in leadership positions as to how do we work together, don't have to work on the same path, but we don't interrupt or dismantle or there should be a synergy. What I mean is when we add the sum of all of our effort, it's going to be much greater than the actual sum.
So would you advise on that topic that the community would be better off if we had an annual conference where all the Canadian Tamil groups came together and they looked to build a greater unity that spelled out the mandates of each one? Do you think that's a value?
Yeah, I think there is value, but even before that, we need to work. We need to start working. We need to have open doors within these organizations that Neethan mentioned. Canadian Tamil Congress is an inclusive organization. It's an elected board of members and who come from different professions of different trade. So we are definitely open to dialogue with other organizations who may have same or different views. And I certainly appreciate people can have different views for the same goal or same objectives. but it'll add value when people start talking together.
Okay.
So that we can go on the same road with a unified path.
All right.
Yeah.
There's a clip I want you gentlemen to watch, and then we'll speak out. And I think it forms the heart of the debate of what's happening in Sri Lanka within the Tamil community and how it'll go forward.
Okay.
Can we play the clip?
They consider that their role is to negotiate with the government, and added to, I mean, there are certain crucial differences. The international community possibly now plays a crucial role, etc., etc. But they have, I think, gone back to a sort of, let's compromise, let's take what we can at the moment. We should not be using the word nation and self-determination in our articulation of what Tamil rights are. We should be talking about ourselves as minority who are asking for equal rights, so on and so forth. So there's been a lot of toned up.
Okay, so this clip featured Guruparan, who's been on our show before, and he's a law lecturer at the University of Jaffna, and he did his master's at law at Oxford.
Right.
And he, by they, he's referring to the TNA, the Tamil National Alliance, the main political party right now representing Tamil interests in Sri Lanka.
Right.
And how he framed it is that the TNA is looking to argue for Tamil rights and equality and equity through the rights as a minority, whereas as Guruparan argued that we should argue it through as a nationhood and with the right to self-determination. And that's seeming to be the question being focused onto which strategy is best suited.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think TNA as a political party has its own decision to make. And if TNA's decision to do something does not resonate with the public there who elects them will react to it. But one thing I want to mention is that through many years of hardship, many sacrifices that we've established in the international scene as well as locally, that we are a nation and we have a traditional homeland, we have a right to self-determination. Right to self-determination does not necessarily mean we are asking for separate homeland. Having that right to self-determination, establishing that we do have a traditional homeland, are basis of a solution long term, right?
Many in the Sinhalese would say that is on, if you're asking for that, you're asking for a separate state.
Well, I think the right to self-determination is a human right that should be given to any nation. If first thing is, would those in the Sinhalese community who are arguing that, would they recognize Tamils as a nation, right? That's the very first question. If they do recognize them as a nation, right to self-determination automatically comes for it, right? Because that's what the actual right is, right? If there is a way to peacefully coexist with political rights, with rights that are giving the Tamil people the decision making, I think the Tamils then will decide whether to stay as a unitary state or not.
And right. Kumar, the CTC has held, has received the TNA in Canada and Sumandar and spoke at the gala dinner earlier this year.
Yes.
What is your take on that?
Yeah,
the differences?
The right to self-determination is the choice of the people. Like Neethan said, if that is what they want and they are going to choose that. And CTC as an organization, TNA as a political party should respect that. But again, self-determination comes in steps. You can achieve self-determination overnight. You have to build steps, and you have to work with the Sri Lankan government, who actually is the government of Sri Lanka, to get to that level. And I believe TNA is working towards that, and they are building the blocks and making the demands to get to that stage. Again, the self-determination can be thrown in different perspectives. One could call that nationhood. Sinhalese majority could call that nationhood, or they might be threatened by that use of that word.
Okay.
But again, it's how the Sri Lankan politicians are twisting that word into the majority of the people, right? And that's what's happening in Sri Lanka. They are using the term self-determination as equal to bringing nationhood. Do we need another nation? Again, that's the choice of the people, and we need to leave that to the people of Sri Lanka.
Okay, so that's a theme that's very present when we discuss Tamil politics, nationhood and the right to self-determination. An emerging theme that's coming up within Canada and the diaspora is this idea of reconciliation. Recently, TVO's The Agenda had a show, and Neethan, you appeared on it, and Kumar, you wrote a rebuttal on the agenda, which was published. And what are the concerns being pushed? What are the concerns as a community we should have of those who are pushing reconciliation?
Well, I think those pushing reconciliation first needs to address that there needs to be a lot of justice that needs to come on the forefront. Okay. When you don't have peace and justice, it's hard to do reconciliation. So what happened to the tens of thousands of people who were killed? What happened to all the human rights violations? Where are the rights of the Tamil community? So if that does not get addressed, reconciliation is meaningless. In fact, it will support an oppressive government.
Kumar?
I agree. I mean, reconciliation, it should be impartial. It should be inclusive of all people who wants to reconcile. Building hospitals, building wells, building schools, those are infrastructure improvement. They are not reconciliation. Reconciliation should touch and feel. You have to feel that you've been reconciled, you've been included in the process. You should be able to express your feelings and look for justice. When that justice is provided, then you can talk about, can we reconcile?
Unfortunately, this has been a good discussion, and I hope to have you guys on for a longer discussion, but time is up. Thank you, Kumar. Thank you, Neethan. Thank you, dear viewers, for joining us. Please visit our TVI Facebook page to find information to support Myron. As many of you know, Myron's cousin and friend were here a few shows ago with Manjula to describe the situation he was in, the medical condition, the help we can give him. So please visit our Facebook page to find further information. Also, on a happy note, we'd like to send a warm and happy congratulations to one of our TVI staff, Deeban. Congratulations on your wedding, and on behalf of all of us, congratulations. Thank you for watching Crossroads with Karthiga. See you in 2 weeks. Have a good week.